Put your fucking phone on the charger there in Trinity's room. And don't say another word to Mark about it, all right?
Welcome back, strike team. Let's go get him.
Build-up. We've deployed a dark ether recon rover near your position.
What do you break?
Strike team, get to the coordinates to begin rover escort.
On the computer? On the computer?
Yeah.
Well, then I'll have a talk with him about that whenever I get there.
Sorry.
You don't need to deal with it, I will. Okay?
You're 17 years old. Yes?
What's the problem?
What?
What's the problem?
Huh?
So what is the problem? Were they bitching at you for?
Alright, love you.
Love you too.
Bye.
Bye.
Sorry about the sound, mate. I'll be hanging on to this.
Now 18.3, duties of individual members of the armed forces corresponds to post 1803, which says, how do you safeguard the integrity of our elections from domestic and foreign criminal actors? Now, that means the military is going to take over the government and fix the election system next time around, I think. It doesn't make sense to do a short election for a reduced presidential term, less than 4 years, because who would want to run for a short time? Now that doesn't really make sense to change the cycle where you're pushing, the next election forward like 2 years or whatever. I think the plans for the military to take over for several years under martial law and, do arrests in that time and then perform first contact. So my understanding is that the election system is so broken and rigged that it was beyond the capability of the government under Trump's administration to fix. That's how rigged the system was, that the government couldn't actually manage to correct that system, that we had to have this rigged election in 2020 and the military is going to give proof of their election fraud, and they themselves, that is the military, are going to fix the next election and they'll supervise it. So their aim is not to stay in power indefinitely, but rather to take control of the government for several years and conduct mass arrests in military tribunals and eventually disclosure and first contact, and then to give power back to a sovereign power after the next election. So their aim is to restore sovereign power to control of the country. It's not a power grab for themselves. And so this post 1803 corresponds to chapter 18.3, which is here. Each member of the armed forces has a duty to comply with the law of war in good faith and refuse to comply with clearly illegal orders to commit violations of the law of war. And what that means is President Biden is commander-in-chief of the military and the military is down in the chain of command from him. But they have to disobey violations of the law of war that are illegal, and those will be coming from Biden. And part of that could be to remove his whole administration. So we'll see about that. That's reprisals 18.18. It comes later on. But they don't have to obey illegal orders, not just the commanders, but the whole of the military. And then .4, commander's duty to implement and enforce the law of war. Actually missing a line here. Is lost track. Corresponds to 1804. Q asks, what is present? No connection, logical thinking. Message sent by 5. So Q is asking, are the autists, which are people obsessed with details, finding details, why have they not made a connection from Q post 1804 to chapter 18.4 in the Law of War Manual, commander's duty to implement and enforce the law of war. Now, when we look at that chapter, so I think it's actually missing from this graphic. It basically says that legally these military commanders have to follow the law of war themselves, and they also have to avoid violations of the law of war. And when you read between the lines, as Q says here, post 1074, which corresponds to that same number of the law of war. When you read between the lines, it means that the military's duty is to remove the Biden administration from power because they're the occupying power who ousted a sovereign power, which was President Trump, at the time of the election, 2020. So let's continue on. 18.5, role of judge advocates and legal advisors. Responds to post 1805. So Cube quotes himself, again emphasizing the same what is present, no connection, logical thinking that Q said in that post, and in addition saying message sent, we know. And 18.6, dissemination, study and other measures to facilitate understanding of duties under the law of war. Q said as in post 1806, full attack mode. And he talks about fake news, but what I think it actually means when you apply double meaning is that Q is trying to teach us about the law of war by making these connections so that we can understand what's going to happen before it does. And so when it happens, if you watch my videos, you know what's actually going on, right? So it's actually the double meaning that Q is on full attack mode by, doing disclosure and in the Q drops and making posts for several years before the storm. And we need to learn not just Q's posts, but actually military law and the law of war. So That's what's coming next. 18.7, instructions, regulations, and procedures to implement and enforce the law of war. Corresponds to post 1807. Shows some several graphics there. Quotes an old Q post that says, "Conspiracy, fake news, the swamp is being drained. Trust the plan. Just." This. Nothing to see here. Logical thing.
There goes minor claims.
Thinking. Now you can find much more when you go into the actual post. I didn't fit everything into this proof because it just gets so big. But when you look at chapter 11.7, read what's in that, then you understand more about this. I didn't try to fit everything. Into this proof, it was just kind of like the core essence of this theory that I have. So 18.9 states obligation with respect to violations of the law of war. Corresponds to post 1809, which shows a tally of the sealed indictments by state, and there's a double meaning with states, and states in America 50, and state capital S in the law of war manual. So there's supposed to be over 200,000 sealed indictments right now. At this time in this graphic, it sees at the bottom, but hard to see, but it says 45,000 there. This was back in July 2018, so a long time. We go now and read some of the 18.9 chapter there. States have certain obligations with respect to alleged violations of the law of war within their jurisdiction. In some cases, these obligations to address alleged violations of particular treaties may be understood as part of the general obligations to implement and enforce those treaties. In other cases, law of war treaties impose specific requirements on states with respect to alleged violations of obligations in those treaties.
That's silence done.
Continuing on, 18.10, which is one of the biggest ones actually, worth spending more time on that. Methods for responding to violations of the law of war by the enemy corresponds to post 1810, which says, "Do you believe in coincidences?" And this is a expanded screenshot of that chapter. So in the event of violation of the law of war, it may be possible for the injured state to resort to remedial action of the following types. So I think what's going to happen first is this at the bottom. Punishment of captured offenders as war criminals, either through national or international tribunals. It's military tribunals, so I think military is going to do that themselves. And then retortion and reprisals. So I think that Trump already did retortion at the end of his term when, after November 3rd and before January 20th, the inauguration date, he tried to do everything in his power to overturn the election and he failed. So I think Trump actually already did retortion. And what it means is trying to get the enemy, the opposing side, to stop what they're doing and change their ways. But since, Biden administration, since they were never going to concede to Trump, and since they were already in power, there's no way that any further retortion would have an effect. Because You can't just get them to stand down and leave a void in government. That's why the military's got to just take over and take power and get rid of the Biden administration, arrest them, charge them in military tribunals, because they can't just leave a void in the government with no government in America. So the military's got to take over the government. And that is the meaning of reprisals there, which we'll come to a little bit later. Publication of the facts with a view to influencing public opinion against the offending belligerent. So that's essentially disclosure, but I think that will happen afterwards, not before. Because if you do it before, it's going to telegraph the plan for the military to, due to the storm. But I think even though it's at the start of this chapter, at the top of the screenshot here that I have, it doesn't mean that's going to happen first. I think it's going to happen afterwards. It will be official disclosure. Now we'll go to 18.11, protests and demands to the offending party, which I think Trump already did, So 18.12, UN Security Council and enforcement of the law of war. We have it here. Post 1812 says, quite far down, I do solemnly swear or affirm that I will support and defend the Constitution of the United States against all enemies, foreign and domestic, that I will bear true faith and allegiance to the same, that I take this obligation freely without any mental reservation or purpose of evasion, and that I will well and faithfully discharge the duties of the office on which I am about to enter, so help me God. Remember, you owe to your country, to yourself, to your children, and stand up for the time is now. So that's quoting an old post, and then in this actual post, Q says, comms understood. Do you believe in coincidences? And when we go to the actual chapter there, 18.12, it's talking about the UN Security Council. So 18.12.3 says, authorizing the use of force. The UN Security Council has authorized the use of force in order to protect civilians who are being attacked in violation of war. And then also 18.12.4, authorizing international criminal tribunals. The UN Security Council has established international criminal tribunals for the purpose of prosecuting serious violations of international humanitarian law. The UN Security Council has exercised this authority to create the International Criminal Tribunal for the former Yugoslavia and the International Criminal Tribunal for Rwanda. It's accused saying, comms understood, referring to US military's ability to use force, authorization of the UN Security Council to do that by law, as well as UN Security Council authorizing international criminal tribunals. That's what's going to happen next. It's not just American military tribunal. But it's going to be international tribunals for these war crimes like the virus, but so much more than that. We're talking about the Cabal's crimes as well. That I've covered in previous videos. So, 18.13, national investigations of alleged violations of the law of war, post 1000. And 813, he says infiltration, and then 18.4, international mechanisms to investigate alleged law of war violation. Corresponds to post 1814. Q says full visibility has many advantages right on the schedule, so everyone's going to know about this soon. It's going to break. In some cases, international mechanisms such as commissions of inquiry may be used to investigate alleged law of war violations. Commissions of inquiry might be established by treaty. Commissions of inquiry might also be established by the UN Security Council. And then 18.15, protecting power and other neutral intermediaries. corresponds to 1815. Q says kill box capital S, so S means signal. In the comms, and 18.16 compensations for violations of the law. Corresponds to post 1816, where Q says there is evidence why we needed to go mainstream prior to the evidence being dropped. You have more than you know, D5, WW1, WGA. Something big is coming, that is for sure. And then 18.17 torsion and 18.18 reprisals. So have them up here. Q quotes burial post. They are 1332. Fellow patriots, what you're about to learn should not only scare you but intensify your resolve to take back control, freedom. The information that will become public will further demonstrate the criminal and corrupt, pure evil abuse of power that the Hussein administration undertook in joint efforts with domestic and foreign dignitaries. The snowball has begun rolling. There's no stopping it now. D5. Stay the course and trust the plan. Protective measures are in place. Remain brave. We knew this day would come. United we stand. Worldwide. WW1, WGA. We fight. Conspiracy no more. And retortion. So as I said, I think Trump's already done the retortion, but you know, the military's going to do disclosure after making arrests. So
Target eliminated.
18.18 is like one of the most important ones. In that post 1818, Q says reconcile, talking about retortion. So we're going to see US military reprisals against the Biden administration, I believe. And within that post also says it's time to learn the truth. So we need to learn this law of war stuff, guys. You know, I was like really reluctant to at first. I was like, man, I don't understand this. I have no idea what's going on. But then I realized like, this is what's going to happen. This is part of learning Q's posts. You've got to understand this law of war. You've got to understand military law. Because this is actually what's going to happen. Everyone in the whole world is going to find out when there are military tribunals, international tribunals, mass arrests are going to take place, the storm's going to happen, and it's going to happen like inevitably, so we might as well learn about it now and not wait. And reprisals got it there. Reprisals are extreme measures of coercion used to help enforce the law of war by seeking to persuade an adversary to cease violations. States may resort to reprisals only when certain conditions are met. In addition, there are certain treaty prohibitions on reprisal, and practical considerations may counsel against their use. 18.18.1 Definition of reprisal. Reprisals are acts taken against a party, one, that would otherwise be unlawful, two, in order to persuade that party to cease violating the law. So what it means is, from my understanding at least, is that the US military can do almost anything to remove the Biden administration from power, because normally they have to do retortion first, but I think Trump's already did that. So I think the conditions for reprisal have already been met, like when the US military makes a move. Obviously, my whole theory revolves around the US military making this late move late in the game. But when you understand this document and the key posts mirrored into it, it seems like this was always the plan. Like the plan was for Trump to have the election stolen from him so that the military could take over the government, so it was a trap. The deep state was worried about Trump, but removing him gives the military the legal basis to take over the whole government and conduct military tribunals, therefore fast-tracking arrests. And from that point onwards, everything would happen extremely quickly. 18.19 and 18.20 are linked. They are discipline in national jurisdictions of individuals for violations of the law of war and prosecution at international and hybrid courts. So Q updates his trip code in those posts, 1819 and 20, and they're exactly the same posts except in the second one. Q says confirmed, which means Q is confirming that there are going to be international and hybrid courts. So I have that at the bottom. It's just like a pain because my face gets in the way of the bottom right of the graphic. But 18.20.4 says hybrid or mixed tribunals. In some cases, an international tribunal may mix elements of domestic and international law. For example, war crimes trials by national tribunals were conducted after World War II under the military government formed by the Allies to govern occupied Germany. So there's going to be a mix of federal arrests and military arrests that we're going to see, especially formed for the occasion. And that hasn't happened yet, but it will. And as I covered in my previous videos, possible double meaning to the word trip there. Got the macOS dictionary definition of the word trip in sense number 3 with object activate, a mechanism, especially by contact with a switch, catch, or other electrical device. Somebody tripped the alarm. No object. Of part of an electric circuit. Disconnect automatically as a safety measure. The plugs will trip as soon as any change in current is detected. So it means that these international and hybrid courts and disciplined national jurisdictions for violations of the law of war are a mechanism or trip that's going to be engaged with what's about to happen. And so we're going to see specially formed courts for an occasion of federal and military arrests as well as state arrests, a mix of those, depending on what crimes have been committed. Like some people might commit all three of those categories of crimes. Other people might be just military arrests. Some might be federal. So that's the reason why we haven't seen arrests happen yet. It's because the military is going to take over first and they will be the ones to do the arrests. And they'll also be in charge of the tribunals. They'll arrange for that to happen. And 18.21 limits on the punishment of individuals under the law of war corresponds to their 1821. Important to understand prior to next. So that was actually a really big one. These last few ones, actually, there's a lot in them. I'm not going to read them all out, but you should definitely check it out in the law of war manual. Too much to go into right here. I have some of it at the bottom, which I'll come to shortly. 18.22 Principles of Individual Criminal Responsibility for Crimes under International Law corresponds to post 1822. Psychological projection, define conspiracy. A secret plan by a group to do something unlawful or harmful. A conspiracy to destroy the government. The action of plotting or conspiring. They were cleared of conspiracy to pervert the course of justice. Fake news, accused links that to the fake news. And again, we've got conspiracy later down in the post. And we go down to 18.23 in the law of war manual. Got definition of conspiracy there. The essence of conspiracy is the combination of minds in an unlawful purpose. The United States has taken the position that conspiracy to violate the law of war is punishable. The United States has used military tribunals to punish unprivileged belligerents for the offense of conspiracy to violate the law of war. And it continues on. I might not read the whole thing, 'cause it's so long, but I've got conspiracy is an offense under the Uniform Code of Military Justice. Conspiracy is an offense under the Military Commissions Act of 2009. Conspiracy to commit an offense under Title 18. The use of conspiracy may vary according to the form in which charges are brought. However, as a general matter, charges of conspiracy for violations of the law of war by persons belonging to the enemy should be restricted to cases of offenses in which an overt act has been committed, because non-punitive measures such as security detention may be available to address threats. And then conspiracy to commit genocide, which is a big one, and also this whole section. Other group criminality theories, 18.23.6, joint criminal enterprise, that's a really big one. You should read it. I'm not going to read it now, I'm just going to make this video too long. And 18.23 is what we just covered, but post 1823 says, the more you know, and it quotes the same section, but as well, a bit earlier on, it says ordering, 18.23.1, a person who orders another person to commit an offense is generally punishable as though that person had committed the offense directly. And then instigating or directly inciting, command responsibility. Command responsibility is a distinct offense. Aiding and abetting. So all these sorts of people who are involved in electoral fraud and so many other crimes, they're going to be charged, with federal and possibly military charges. And I think I'm coming to the end of this chapter here. There are other connections, like page numbers, for example, here in post 1111 or 1111, Q quotes an older post reposted by an anon, in which it says military start, and Q says amazing coincidence plus military start / war. You have more than you know. And that corresponds to page 1111, the same number in numerology. On that page it says reprisals. Definition of reprisals, which we've covered before. And when you link that together, Q is saying reprisals, it's chapter 18.18, that's on page 1111. Reprisals plus military equals US military reprisals. Amazing coincidence that they're on the same number numerologically. 1111, you have more than you know. And then a few other ones, let's see, I don't think I even read the section out, 18.19, discipline in national jurisdictions of individuals for violations of the law of war. In most cases, individuals are disciplined in national jurisdictions for violations of the law of war. Corrective action may take the form of adverse or corrective administrative actions. Punishment may take the form of non-judicial punishment or judicial actions in military or civilian courts, depending on the circumstances. In some cases, prosecutions in the national courts are carried out by charging violations of domestic law, but in other cases, prosecutions are carried out by charging violations of international law. And then some more sections. 18.19.2, charging of domestic prosecutions as violations of international law or domestic law. And 18.19.3, U.S. law that can be used to punish violations of the law of war. And 18.19.3.4, federal crimes punishing conduct outside the United States, which is I mentioned, torture, genocide, terrorism, biological weapons acts, and chemical weapons acts. And then we've got U.S. military commissions in 18.19.3.7, which is another name for military tribunals. So let's see what else we've missed here. I think that was most of it in this proof, at least. Yeah, or should I say mention on page 1069, which is the page that the chapter 18 implementation and enforcement of the law of war is on. That post 1069 by Q, it says you have more than you know. And so we do have more than we know. We have this law of war that says all this stuff that I just talked about. Now, guys, that's basically the end of the video. Now, you cannot say that these are all coincidences because there's too many of them. There's just too many. And when I was doing this dig, I was shocked by how much that I found, right? Because I started doing this dig not knowing if I was going to find anything. But I saw that Anon's post about the law of war, and it took me weeks to understand this manual. I still haven't read all of it, but there's mainly a few sections that are important, like chapter 11 and 18 and the 4.3 and a few others, which I've read a few times and I've made several videos about it. Now, I'll make a playlist with the videos in the series because I've said other things that I haven't repeated in this video. So if you want to go back and watch the older videos that I made before this about the law of war, you can watch that because it's too much to repeat. I don't want this video to be too long, and it already is long enough. And there's also much more that I could fit in this proof. What I've included in this proof is just the best stuff that I could find, the most clear-cut connections and the most obvious double meanings and so forth. And so we'll come to Casual Channel Chatter, a segment that I put at the end of some videos, and I'm reusing a meme that I found on Tumblr many years ago. I should use this for one of my other videos as well. I like noticing details that no one else sees. So this is definitely the biggest breakthrough video on the channel that I've ever made, and it happened to be video number 100 exactly. It's really strange that it happened that way. Going to 3 digits, that is the number 100, from 2 digits, that is the number 99, and going from the number 9 to 1, just 9 is the last number on a single-digit scale, and 1 is the first number. So it's starting its new cycle of videos. And I don't know if I'll ever get to video 1,000. It's a long way away. It's assuming I do 10 times as many videos. I don't know how long that would take, but you know, the way that I felt is that everything led to this point in this video. The whole course of this channel, where I was learning the comms, doing these digs and decodes, and I made a lot of mistakes, and it didn't really matter because I learned so much. Everything led to this point. So I
If I were to tell you my wife is 125 feet tall, and we need to make
months ago, and it was like everything in my life relating to this channel at least led to this video being made, right? Because I spent years reading and researching the QPost and Majestic 12, and I spent so long just reading that online, digging and trying to do decodes, and I learned so much from that when I came to this dig, I was able to do it right because of the previous
I sent
experience
y'all
that I had.
an email I want you to watch. It kind of...
Well, it may not be tonight.
No. But it lays out...
We're on a roll here.
Yeah, but it lays out the military law and how the military law is... That way...
We watched that with that young guy that was explaining the things for Q are actually
Yes.
in the military law.
Yes.
Yeah, we already watched that.
Okay, I just wanted to make sure you saw that. And Raul Castro stepped down.
I just, well, that's how I responded to you. I just was looking at my text and I saw that.
Yeah. So why would a communist leader step down?
I don't know. Did they say who's taking over?
Nope, not yet.
Oh, if Trump actually has control of the military and they have these people in Guantanamo, then it wouldn't surprise me for America to take over Cuba.
Oh, America will. We'll take it over and we'll make it a state, our territory.
No, actually, I think we may make it the prison. I think the island may become a prison. We carry the Cuban people over here and make that a prison. And to me, that'd be a good idea.
But what are you gonna do with what are you gonna do with all the people who are living there already?
That's what I said. You'd have to bring them to America or let them work there in the prison systems and stuff. But
yeah, and we don't need their asses here. We don't need any more.
Most of them don't want to be communists.
Yeah, well, we don't need any more immigrants in this country until we can teach the immigrants to appreciate the country that they're in.
No, I agree.
And a lot of people,
If you've ever met a Cuban, most Cubans do respect freedom, and that's one civilization that works to. In the bulk of them, I'm not going to say everybody. Well, the bulk of them work to become Americans. I mean, they've lived in communist regimes their whole life.
But I don't trust them because look at Monica. Monica was the same fucking way, and you know she was under.
Monica was from Venezuela, and Venezuela had just turned. It had just turned communist, so she also knew and she didn't live through the real communism when it got super, super bad. She left there before then.
Okay, this right here is from NBC News. NBC is the one with the peacock, right?
Yeah, I think so.
Cuba's Raul Castro confirms he is stepping down, says he's fulfilled his mission. That's on NBC News.
What was his mission?
I don't know. But that's on NBC News. Now here's CNN. CNN News says Raul Castro steps down, ending the era of his famous clan, which is his family, his famous clan at the country's helm. So that's ABC, CNN. So Gateway or AP is announcing it. So it's all over. So I just question, why would a communist leader step down whenever he has full power and the Communist Party has full power over the world right now? Things that make you go exactly,
Yeah.
So, but it's small little things that people aren't catching, you know?
Yeah.
Because Merkel stepped down too earlier this year. So I think something's going on, but like that kid said, you know, they can't tell us because.
No, if they tell us, well, then the enemy has the plan.
Exactly.
Yeah, and they need to quit even leaking out what they're leaking out. Do what you're going to do, and then reveal it to the American people.
Well, from what that kid said, it's already been done, and what they're doing now is they're not going to put Trump in presidency for 2 years. They're going to go ahead and maintain, the military is going to maintain the government. Eventually...
Well, they keep letting Biden pass all this bullshit, and, I mean, look at what they're doing to our dollar.
Yeah, well, I know.
Somebody better do something.
Well, okay, but the thing is Trump wants to get away from the Federal Reserve. We want the dollar to collapse because we want a new currency. Because we want to get out from underneath the Rothschilds. That's why we have to be careful with our investments and stuff. Because the dollar will crash. The market's going to crash.
Oh, yeah.
So...
Yeah, everybody keeps talking about how great the stock market's doing. The whole
It's a
reason why
fake
the stock
bubble.
market's doing great is because they're pouring all the stimulus into it.
Hey, it's a fake...
All this money that they're printing, they're just pouring it into the stock market.
Yeah, it's
I watched a little clip today. That's exactly what Rwanda did.